Hi, folks. We're here for the mini lecture on memory and delivery forms. This is meant to accompany the CRIC chapter on memory and delivery. So if you haven't read that already, please go back and take a look at that before looking at this lecture. All right. So starting out with memory was originally an important, fully fledged one of the 5 canons of rhetoric. Very significant in classical times and antiquity. Now it's very much neglected for a lot of cultural and technological reasons that you can imagine. We feel like we have smartphones now and teleprompters, so we don't pay too much attention to memory, at least in its traditional form. You may have read a little bit in the CRIC chapter about some historical accounts of the old memory palace method in ancient Greece and classical Rome. A lot of stories of the amazing feats of memory from the orators and poets and rhapsodes and so on. That may seem a little outdated, antiquated, but in the CRIC book on 59 to 61, he's got a lot of what maybe sort of a little more modern, updated techniques that are still based on sort of the same principles. And some of those may actually help you in your speaking, so I encourage you to take a look at those. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about delivery forms that I've kind of lumped in along with memory because it's related to how you're going to recall the information for your speech to deliver it. All right? So the basic 4 types of delivery forms are covered extensively in the CRIC book. I'm going to talk a little bit more about them here and give you some of my own sort of tips. So the first is manuscript delivery. So this is essentially reading delivery, rote reading recitation of your speech. We're not going to do that too much in this course, and it's generally not going to be the most helpful to you in your public speaking career. There are occasions where it's useful. Sometimes you may want to make sure you're in direct control of what's being said. Think about a lawyer or public relations person with their client. Sometimes they want to make sure that they parse the words exactly 100% in a particular way to achieve a certain legal or some other kind of result, right? Also, sometimes actually at academic conferences, you'll see manuscript delivery where people read their papers verbatim. And sometimes that can be a good thing, and more often it's kind of not a good thing. And actually, manuscript delivery, there's kind of an art to it in itself. You have to know your paper, obviously, and present it in a particular way, and usually like mark up the copy that you're reading from to sort of cue you in to when to vary your pitch and tone and rate and all those things. We're not going to worry too much about that for this course. Another form is impromptu. This is essentially when you're asked to give a speech without any preparation whatsoever. Again, this isn't going to be one that we're going to think about too much in this course at least for the graded speeches. We do have a lot of the exercises where we're going to get some practice in impromptu speaking. And while it's maybe not the best for a formal speech or a graded speech, it is an important skill to have in your public speaking life. There will be times on a job interview or other situations where you're asked a question or asked to speak without too much time to prepare, and you're going to have to sort of think quickly on your feet. So luckily, we will get some practice with that in this course, primarily through our practice activities. Now, extemporaneous, the next one, is kind of the sweet spot where you're going to want to be most of the time for most of your speeches that you're going to deliver in this course and in your public speaking life. And usually in that case, you're going to prepare something like an outline, a few speaking points, sometimes on note cards or sometimes on a computer or teleprompter screen or what have you. And you're going to have those speaking points, and they'll sort of remind you and keep you on track. But you're going to have to fill in the rest of it either from memory or in a manner similar to the impromptu, right? And extemporaneous speaking strikes a little bit of a balance between the other two. It allows you to glance down, but generally keep your eyes up and maintain a connection with the audience. And it allows you the flexibility to kind of read off the audience and sometimes adjust how much emphasis you're giving one thing, or sometimes reorder the points in your speech. There's a little bit of flexibility that you gain with extemporaneous speaking without having to go completely off the cuff like with impromptu. And the final sort of traditional type is speaking from memory. And this would be similar to the manuscript speaking, but where you memorize the entire speech and deliver it verbatim from memory. Now, a lot of you probably think that sounds impossible unless some of you are involved in acting or something like that. You might have a little practice with this sort of thing. But I assure you it is, or was, an important part of training for the rhetorical tradition, primarily through the exercise of declamation, which we'll talk about in a second because we're actually going to be doing some of that as an extra credit activity if you're interested. But other than for exercises in declamation, memory is probably not going to be your go-to most of the time. Now, here's where I can give you a little bit of added value over the textbook. I'm going to tell you that the real secret is, for most of your speeches that you'll give in this class and in your public speaking life, you're really going to use sort of a mixed delivery form, which would be a combination of two or more of the forms above. And so usually the most effective is going to be combining either memory or manuscript combined with extemporaneous. And the way this would work is you'll make your speech primarily in extemporaneous outline form, but you'll have maybe one place on your outline or one note card reserved where you have sort of a full quotation. Either some material that you're citing or maybe something that you've written, a particular passage for the speech that you want to read verbatim. And there's two ways that you can sort of deploy this. One is to have that passage, that quotation, what have you, and have that kind of in reserve as something that you can go to. If you go up there and freeze and forget what you're doing, then you can go to that quotation, and usually it should be something that kind of pertains to and frames the whole speech. Read it. That'll buy you a few seconds while you're reading it, and hopefully that will remind you of what all the rest of your speaking points are and help you get on track. I have used this before and often use this when I give an academic conference presentation. So I have my extemporaneous speaking points, but then I have something that if I go up there and I get nervous, all of a sudden I read it. It's something that sort of encapsulates my thesis, and that kind of gets me back on track. So that's kind of a good trick you can use. Or you don't have to use it as an emergency thing. You can have it early on in your speech, maybe something that frames the thesis statement, and plan to do it, and it works in a similar way. And just having that there will help you feel a little bit more secure in the rest of your speech. So delivery forms for this course: the demonstration speech, the first one, you can use any form you like. This is just a short practice, get our feet wet speech. I would, again, recommend extemporaneous or mixed, but you can use whichever one you want. For the reporting and argumentation speech, the big speech is in the middle of the course. Any form except manuscript is permitted. Extemporaneous or mixed recommended. The media speech, for this one you can use any form you like. Again, extemp and mixed recommended. And the declamation that I mentioned, extra credit, will be memory only. So that's kind of the whole point of declamation. So that'll be a good way to work on your art of memory in the course.